There's a story I want to share with you that if you're familiar with the writings of the gospel and the story of Jesus, and if you've read the Bible before, you might be familiar with it. It's a story about the rich young ruler, a guy that had a lot of stuff. And it's not wrong to have stuff. Unfortunately, sometimes our stuff ends up having us. The Bible says it's the love of money that is the root of all evil. So there's nothing wrong with having stuff. But this guy had a lot of it. And I want to read to you the story, and then I'd have a few comments about it that I want to share with you. And then invite you into an experience. You know, we don't like to refer to this as a service. We like to refer to it as an experience, and we hope that you will experience the Lord in a way that will change your life. And I'm praying today that this will happen in a way you've never experienced before. It says in Mark chapter 10, it says, when he had traveled on. So, you know, it's interesting about that because Jesus was a contemplative. Do y'all know what a contemplative is? A contemplative, and King David was also a contemplative. He said that in Psalm 27, he said, "One thing have I asked the Lord, that is the thing I'll seek the most." And did you know that King David had a lot of stuff? I mean, when you're a king, you got a lot of stuff. But he said this, he said, "One thing I've asked the Lord, and this is the thing that I'll seek the most. To live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life." And check this out, to behold the beauty of the Lord. And so Jesus was like King David, or King David was like Jesus. He was a contemplative. A contemplative, we can all be contemplatives. A contemplative is someone who seeks God and God alone. A contemplative is someone who realizes that God is not religious. God is highly relational. God is highly personal. It says that Jesus came as Emmanuel. You know what Emmanuel means? It means God with us. And so a contemplative is someone who realizes that it's not about being religious, it's about having a relationship with someone who wants to have a relationship with me. Someone who, it's not about me going up there, it's about Him coming down here. And so I seek the Lord. Why? Why do I seek the Lord? Because I've been found by the Lord, right? But I can find the Lord in a more deeper and deeper way. You know, I've known the Lord since I was 13 years old. It was at a Fellowship of Christian Athletes camp that I went, and I prayed to invite Jesus to come into my life. I realized that it wasn't about attending church. You know, attending church doesn't make you a Christian any more than drinking Tang makes you an astronaut. Everybody know what Tang is? Now you know how old I am. Or like my dad said when I did an interview with him on Father's Day, it doesn't make you what did he say, having a car in a garage doesn't make you a mechanic or something like that. It's not about attending church. It's not about being religious. It's about having a relationship. And each of you know that think about the relationship that you value the most. Think about that person that you love. Think about that person that you care about. Don't you continue to get to know them? And they get to know you. You know, it's said, psychologists say that people want to be known. They want to know and they want to be known. So some people spend their whole life trying desperately to be known and end up taking their life because no one ever knew them. Jesus Christ knows you and loves you. And He wants you to know Him and He wants you to love Him. The more you seek Him, the more you find Him. So a contemplative is someone who realizes, I don't just come to church one time and all of a sudden, you know, hey, I'm a Christian. I know the Lord. No, it's about 24/7 continuing to seek to get to know the Lord. And, you know, and I find too that people, you know, sometimes people say, well, what do I do? I don't know what to do. You do the next thing that you feel is right in front of you. If you tell Jesus, I don't know how to get to know you. If you have an honest conversation like, what do I do next? I guarantee you, he will tell you what to do next. And you know, I teach a psychology class, and the psychology class goes like this, that the most important goal is not the one that we set for next week. It's not the one that we set next month. It's not the one that we set next year. The most important goal is the one that's 2 to 3 hours ahead of you. It's the next step. If you tell Jesus, how do I be a contemplative? How do I get to know you? How do I inquire in your temple and behold your beauty? I guarantee you, he will show you what to do next. And if you do what's next, he will tell you what to do next. And you will continue to find the Lord in a way that will revolutionize your life from the inside out. That is a contemplative. It says that Jesus would get up early before everyone else. I'm not saying you have to get up early before everyone else. Some of us are night owls. But he got up before anyone else because he wanted to have a quiet place where he could be alone with his Father. He was a contemplative. It was amazing how people tried to steal that from him, just like our culture and media and people and responsibilities and our work tries to, interfere with that moment. As the morning progressed, we find that the disciples would often come and find Jesus at a quiet place. But Jesus was also a connector. He was out. See, when you really read the life of Jesus, he was very busy. I mean, he connected with people like crazy. But he took as much time. In fact, even one time he went 40 days into the desert to practice contemplation. Let me tell you something. If you take time to seek the Lord, that will nourish your soul more than any drug. That will nourish your soul more than anything you can find in this life. It'll also guide your soul to invest in or to come alongside of some of the hobbies in life, or some of the joys in life, and some of the people in life that God absolutely is not against you having. He's like, hey, you can handle it. Go have a good time. Go enjoy that hobby. And in fact, go enjoy that person. In fact, that's the person I want you to develop a relationship with, because, by the way, it's not good to be alone. He was a connector. Now, I love this phrase. It just literally jumped out at me. When he had traveled on, because he had been connecting with people. And that is his heart this morning, to connect with you. When he had traveled on, a young man came and knelt in the dust of the road in front of Jesus. Now, we're not sure. He probably inherited his money. Because when you were 13, you would come along beside of your mom, if you were a young lady, or if you were a son, there would be a rite of passage. And you would move from what was called guardianship, where a teacher was teaching you math and arithmetic and spelling and all those types of things. And you would literally come and stand beside your dad if you were a son. And you would learn the family business. And you began to work the family trade. You would find your way in life. And that was a beautiful thing. A son standing beside his father. A daughter standing beside her mother. What does it mean to be a young woman? What does it mean to be a young man? And so we're not sure how he got his money, but probably from family inheritance. And that was a rare thing back then, because only a small population of the people were like Roman citizens, and you were either born as a Roman citizen or somehow brought in because you knew someone. Most of the in that culture, there was not middle income people. You were either lower income, poor, or you were the upper income. You were on the ends. You were on the inside. Very few people owned property. Only the elite. And this man came from that. Notice it says he was a young man. And he came, but notice this, he came and he knelt. There was something in him that was searching. All his stuff wasn't doing it. He was searching for more. He knelt in the dust of the road in front of Jesus and probably in front of a whole lot of other people. We definitely know that he definitely knelt in front of the 12 disciples because the 12 disciples were following Jesus wherever he went for 3 years. And I just see this picture of this young man seeking the Lord. And he hadn't found the Lord. And he had heard about Jesus. And he had heard about how Jesus is changing the lives of people. And he's thinking to himself, this isn't doing it. I'm not going to make it. I'm going to take my life. I want to be known and no one really knows me. I want to be loved and no one really loves me. You can be the loneliest person in the world and have all kinds of stuff. He knelt in the dust of the road in front of Jesus. And he said, what must I do to gain life in the world that is to come? And Jesus said this, he said, you know the commandments of Moses, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not slander, do not defraud your father or your mother. Yes, teacher, he said, I have done all of these since I was a child. And looking at him, Jesus loved him. And he said this, son. Notice how Jesus is using family language. It's like he's already calling him a son. He's saying, I want you to find the joy of being a part of a spiritual family. I want you to find the joy of being a part of a family that maybe you've never had. He calls him a son. Son, there is still one thing that you have not done. Go now, sell everything that you have, and give the proceeds to the poor, so that you will have treasure in heaven. And after that, come and follow me. Notice this, he's almost asking this question, what are you willing to sacrifice now so that you will be rewarded for later? It says this about Jesus, Jesus who for the joy that was set before him when he was hanging on the cross, endured the cross. Did you know that Jesus said this? He said, at any moment, I have the authority to call on the legions of heaven to come and rescue me. Jesus had that kind of power. And he chose not to do it. He chose to hang on the cross and say this, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. As the guards ridiculed him and gambled over his clothing, which they had stripped him of. Verbally abusing him, physically abusing him, and in a subtle way, sexually abusing him. With his clothes off. You don't think Jesus understands what people have gone through? And I wonder why in that moment when he said this from the cross, my God, Father, why have you forsaken me? He had never ever said that before, because in that moment on the cross, Jesus felt and in a way experienced everything that every man and woman would ever go through in life. Every way that they would miss the mark. Every way that they would sin against God, Jesus somehow in his spirit experienced it. It was so overwhelming. I believe that's why he said that. I want you to go, I want you to follow me. But there's a challenge that I want you to step up into, because in the challenge you're going to find life. And in the challenge, you're going to learn something that you're going to have an insight so that you can speak into other people's lives that will impact them and change their life. And you can only get that through an experience of challenge. I want you to go sell all you've got. I want you to be willing to give it up for me. And you will have treasure in heaven. And after that, come and follow me. What happened? It says this, that the young man at that moment went away sick at heart at the words of Jesus, because he was very wealthy. He turned down the invitation of Jesus. And you know why I believe that he turned it down? Because he missed a very important moment in this story that I want us to move into focusing on. And it's this phrase. Yes, teacher, I've done all these things since I was a youth. Right before Jesus moves into the challenge, it says this, and looking at him, Jesus loved him. And looking at him, Jesus loved him. You know, we've been talking about how Jesus is both invitational and challenging. And invitational is about his love. Invitational is about forgiving us for no matter what. Invitational is about his mercy, his kindness, his desire to be highly relational with us. I was teaching a class Monday night, and I was talking about how Jesus is invitational, but he's also challenging. He calls us to sacrifice. He calls us to leave things behind in order to find true life. He calls us to do things that are hard. And I said, I want you to close your eyes for a moment, and I want you to, there's 10 people in the class, and all of them participated. I said, if you need to find and experience more of the invitational side of God, raise your hand. And 8 people in that room raised their hand. And then I said, if you need to kind of be more aware and experience more and maybe jump in more to the challenge side of God, raise your hand. And only 2 people did. You know why? Because we live in a culture that is conditional about love. We live in a culture that is about performance. We live in a culture that if you don't know someone, or if you didn't grow up in the right family, or if you're not living in this house or driving this car or whatever, you're not accepted. We live in a culture where we're afraid to be known. And we live in a culture where we are ashamed. And many of us never get this, the look of his love. I've read this story I don't know how many times throughout my life, and I've never seen it. And looking at him, Jesus loved him. You know, it's interesting that Paul was praying for a group of people, and check this out. Here's what he prayed. I pray that they will understand the love of Jesus, that is infinitely long, wide, high, and deep, surpassing everything that anyone has ever experienced. I pray that they will understand and get the challenge of Jesus, the things he's calling us to sacrifice, the getting up a little bit earlier before everyone else gets up so I can have some time alone with him. The turning away from this crowd because I've found out that hanging out with this crowd, bad company, corrupts my life. Getting help for help that I need. Sacrifice, facing my fears and feeling my fear, stepping into it and doing it anyway because Jesus is greater than my fear. No, he didn't say that. He said, I'm praying for these group of people, Lord, that I've led to you. And here's what I'm praying for the most, that they will get how much you love them. Which is so wide and which is so deep and which is so high that no one can truly comprehend it thoroughly. And it's beyond anything that anyone has ever experienced. This young man missed the look of love. I have in my cabinet at home a picture that my mom gave me. And every morning I see it. And it's not about focusing on a picture, by the way, because that can be a form of adultery. Oh, not adultery, idolatry. Yeah, that can be a form of adultery, right. Can we edit that off the tape? Rewind. Yeah, it's not about worshiping a picture. It's about the picture reminding me and looking at her, if you're a woman, and looking at her, Jesus loved her. And looking at him, Jesus loved him. And every morning I open up my cabinet where my vitamins stay, and I see that picture. And it's not a picture of condemnation. And it's not a picture where he's saying, I've been talking to you about these challenges in your life. I've been talking to you about some sacrifices that you need to make. Because one time Jesus said to a woman that was caught in adultery, and of course I don't know where the man was. The last time I looked, it took 2 people to commit adultery. But, it's like he said to her, woman, where are your accusers? Does anyone condemn you? And no one was around because they'd all walked away, because Jesus said, if you're without sin, throw the first stone. So they all left. And she said, no, Lord. And he said this, neither do I condemn you. But now I want you to go. There's a pattern of sin that you've been living in. It's very specific. You don't have to live that way anymore. See, that's a better way of saying it rather than saying this, don't live that way anymore. You don't have to live that way anymore. Do you see the difference? See, that's what we hear. We hear the religious God saying, don't live that way anymore. Quit doing that. And if you don't quit doing it, I may exit. And you're never going to make it. It's Jesus saying this, neither do I accuse you, neither do I condemn you. He looked at her with such a look of love that it changed her life. And because of my look of love upon your life, you don't have to live that way anymore. And so I'm reminded of his look of love. And this is a portrait of Jesus. That is, to me, I see such kindness. I see such love in his eyes. So we're going to move into a time of communion. It's called the Last Supper. And I want to set this up for you because I pray that you will experience the look of his love today. And guess what? Everyone is welcome. If you want to follow Jesus in a way that you've never had before, if you want to come sit at his table to receive his love, it's for everyone. At the Last Supper, Jesus looked at his 12 close followers who had been joining him for 3 years. 3 years. Not 2, but 3. And he said this, he broke bread, and we have little pieces of wafer here, and he took the cup, I'll have Michelle go ahead and fill the cups with the juice. And as you come, you can take the wafer and you can dip it in the cup. But here's what I want you to get. I want you to bring all of your hang-ups. I want you to bring all the ways that you feel like you have failed in your life. I want you to bring all the ways that you somehow feel like God doesn't love you. I want you to bring all the ways that you feel like God's been missing in your life. I want you to bring all the ways that you feel like the Lord has abandoned you somehow, because he hasn't. I want you to bring yourself as you are today. Because the Lord wants to give you this. And looking at him, Jesus loved him. And looking at her, Jesus loved her. The Lord wants to give you a look of his love. And as you come to take this Last Supper, I want you to remember this Last Supper. I want you to imagine that you were there. Because when Jesus gave this Last Supper and he spoke that I'm going to be taken and crucified to a cross, and this is my body which is given for you, and the juice represents my blood which is going to be shed for you, he said this to the 12. He said this, but he looked at them with love. Every one of you are going to desert me. Every one of you. There's even one here sitting at the table who will betray me. And there's someone here, and Peter, it's you. Can you imagine being pointed out? Peter, it's you. You're going to deny 3 times that you ever even knew me. But then he said this, it's going to be okay. And after I rise again, I'm going to meet you on the shores of Galilee. And Peter, he made a point to speak to Peter. I'm going to meet you. It's almost like Peter had really forgotten that, because he did deny Jesus, even though he vowed at that Last Supper. He spoke up. He was a leader, and he was a leader that wasn't afraid to speak up. And he said this. He said, Lord, I'll never do that. I'm ready to die with you. I'm ready to go to prison with you. And when he did that, it says this about Peter: he went out and he wept bitterly. And it's interesting, this is one of the few places in the Bible that we see again the look of love. It says this, that he saw the face of Jesus looking at him. And he felt such shame over what he had done that he went away weeping bitterly. He missed the look of Jesus' love. I want you to know that whatever it is that you feel like you need to bring in terms of yourself, the look of Jesus upon you is not one of condemnation. It's not one of, you better start stepping up, buddy. It's a look of love that he wants to revolutionize your life. It's a love that you've never experienced in this life. It is a divine love. And I'm praying that in this moment you're going to experience such a look of his love that it'll change you from the inside out. So we're inviting you to come in groups of 12. And we're inviting you to sit at this table, to take a piece of the wafer and to dip it in the cup as you feel led to. And up here in the front is a photograph that I have in my cabinet at home that I want to give to you, that I want you to take. And let it be a reminder of his look of love upon your life.